When people say a family joke, they usually mean something stupid but harmless, like a prank that gets everyone laughing at Thanksgiving dinner. What happened to my sister wasn't that. It wasn't a joke, and it sure as hell wasn't harmless. It was the kind of thing that makes you realize some people think cruelty is entertainment. It happened on a cold Saturday in late October. My sister, Elena Crawford, had gone up to Lake Harrow with her husband Preston and his family, the Harrows. They were old money, the kind of people who believed money could buy taste, class, and immunity. Their lake house was huge and soulless, sitting right at the edge of the water, all glass and dark wood. You could tell no one there had ever picked up a broom or cooked their own meal. Elena had begged me to come, but I had duty that week. I serve in the Army Criminal Investigation Division, CID for short, so weekends off aren't exactly guaranteed. I told her to go, have fun, try to get along with her husband's family. She'd married into them against everyone's advice, and she was always trying to prove that she fit in. That morning, she texted me a photo, her smiling on the porch with a mug of coffee, the lake behind her. It looked peaceful. I even smiled back. But that was before the next photo came, the one from the paramedics' phone later that afternoon. Around 3 p.m, the Harrow men Preston and his father Garrett decided it would be funny to see how long Elena could stand the cold water. They were drunk, loud, and full of themselves. Garrett started it, Preston followed, and Elena laughed it off at first. That's what she always did when they humiliated her. She smiled and tried to make it look like she was part of the joke. When they grabbed her by the arms and dragged her down to the pier, she still thought it was all in fun. She was saying things like, "Stop, you guys," but her voice had that nervous laugh in it. I can almost hear it now. Then came the splash. One moment she was standing there, and the next, she was under. Garrett laughed. Preston said something like, "She'll swim out," and then nothing. Elena hit her head on a submerged rock when she fell. The impact knocked her out cold. She didn't scream, didn't thrash. She just disappeared. The water was 40 degrees, black and deep. Garrett looked down for a few seconds, shrugged, and told Preston to grab another beer. They walked back toward the house like nothing had happened. The only person still screaming was Eleanor, my mother. She had gone up for the weekend too, mostly to make sure Elena was treated with a shred of decency. She saw the whole thing happen. She ran down to the dock, shouting, waving, calling their names. They didn't even turn around. She said her voice cracked from yelling, and when she finally stopped, the only sound left was the water slapping against the pier. That's when she saw a man in a small fishing boat about 50 yards away. She pointed toward the water, unable to say anything else. The man, just a local fisherman, didn't hesitate. He drove straight over, pulled Elena out, and started CPR in the boat. By the time the ambulance arrived, my sister was half dead from hypothermia. She had a concussion, water in her lungs, and a gash on her temple. The paramedics worked on her for 15 minutes before she coughed up water. My mother said that sound her breathing again was the worst and best sound she'd ever heard in her life. When Mom called me, I was sitting in a dull beige CID office going through evidence from a base fraud case. The second I heard her voice, I knew it was bad. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just said, "They pushed her." "What?" "Elena. They pushed her in the lake. Preston and his father." I could hear sirens in the background. She sounded eerily calm. That's what told me she wasn't exaggerating. My mom's a retired librarian, quiet, soft-spoken, not the type to panic. But when she said those words, I could hear something else in her voice, something cold and final. I asked her where the Harrows were. She said, "They left." End of 2. "They what?" "They got in their car and drove away." They laughed at me. I looked down at my notepad, the kind I use for interviews. Without realizing it, I wrote the names Garrett Harrow and Preston Harrow in capital letters. Then I drew a small box next to each name, the kind you check off when a task is completed. Mom said Elena was being taken to the hospital in Carson City. She was stable but critical. I told her I'd be there in 2 hours. Before I hung up, she said something that still gives me chills. "They think this is over," she said quietly. "But I already called your brother." That made me pause. "You called Isaac?" She didn't answer right away. "He'll know what to do." I didn't like the sound of that. Isaac isn't military. He's a journalist, or was, before he got blacklisted for going after a few people who thought they were untouchable. He's smart, but he's not careful. If she'd told him everything, it meant this was about to get very messy, very fast. When I got to the hospital, Elena was pale and hooked up to every machine imaginable. The doctor said she was lucky her head wound could have been fatal. Preston hadn't even bothered to show up. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't send flowers. But later that night, a nurse came into Elena's room holding a massive bouquet of white lilies. The card said, "Let's not let your mom's drama ruin our fun. Love, Preston." Mom read it once, folded it neatly, and put it in her pocket. No yelling, no tears. Just a quiet, deliberate motion like she was filing it under evidence. That's when I realized she wasn't waiting for me to handle this. She was already handling it herself. I stood by the hospital window looking out at the parking lot, thinking about everything I'd seen in my years with CID murders disguised as accidents, suicides that were really cover-ups. But even in that world, this felt personal. The Harrows didn't just hurt my sister. They laughed about it. They walked away, and they thought no one would ever make them answer for it. They were wrong. That's the thing about people who believe they're above consequences. They never see it coming when someone like me walks into their world. They expect tears and apologies. They never expect precision. And as I stood there in that fluorescent-lit hospital room, listening to the steady beep of Elena's heart monitor, I knew exactly what had to happen next. The hospital coffee was terrible, but it kept my hands busy. I stared at the cup, listening to the hum of the vending machine when my phone buzzed. It wasn't a number I recognized, but I didn't need to. Only one person calls me from an unlisted line. "Fiona," said a deep, steady voice. "Your mother called me." "Yeah," I said. I figured. Oh, it was Isaac Rayner, my older brother, ex-journalist, unofficial human bloodhound, and the reason more than one politician still wakes up sweating at night. Isaac had a reputation. When he found a story, he didn't write it to entertain. He wrote it to end someone's career. I didn't ask what Mom told him. I knew he'd already pulled the threads she'd left hanging. That's what he does. "They pushed her," he said flatly. "Garrett and the son. They walked away. There's footage." "Haas. Footage?" I straightened up. "Security cameras. The pier's part of a private neighborhood system. It's grainy, but it's enough to prove she didn't slip." "Do you have it?" "I will tonight," he said. "I'm calling a guy who manages maintenance for the homeowners association. He's got gambling debts. I've helped people like that before." That was Isaac's polite way of saying I know how to make him talk. I told him to stay out of it, but even I didn't believe myself. "This isn't your kind of story," I said. "It's not a story," he replied. "It's family." I didn't argue. When Isaac said something like that, it meant the fuse was already lit. I went back to Elena's room. She was awake but quiet, her eyes fixed on the TV that was playing some home renovation show with fake laughter and louder wallpaper. Her face looked too pale against the pillow. "Hey," I said softly. "You feeling any better?" She nodded weakly. "I don't remember falling. Just water. Cold. Then nothing." I pulled up a chair. "The Harrows said it was an accident." Her eyes flicked toward me. "Of course they did." Her voice was hoarse, but the sarcasm was still there. "They'll probably tell people I tripped, or that I can't swim. You don't have to think about them right now." But she already was. I could see it, the guilt, the confusion, the humiliation. That's what those people were best at, making you question your own reality until you stopped fighting back. When she fell asleep, I stepped out to call Mom. She sounded calm, too calm. That's how I know she was angry. "He's already working," she said. "Isaac." "Yeah, I talked to him. He said he'd handle the Harrows quietly. You know what that means?" "I know," I said. Silence on the line. Then she added, "They laughed, Fiona. When I screamed for help, they laughed. I saw them." I closed my eyes. I'd been in Afghanistan twice, seen men do monstrous things. But hearing your mother say that, with that hollow tone that comes after shock wears off, was worse than any battlefield. "They won't laugh again," I said. Later that night, I drove to the Harrows property myself. The place looked like a magazine ad for money without taste stone columns, imported tiles, lights glowing warm and fake through massive windows. A security guard at the gate asked for my name. I told him I was with CID following up on a private matter. He waved me through. People always move when they hear CID. Their SUV was in the driveway. Garrett's black Escalade and Preston's silver Lexus. I parked across the street and waited. No one inside knew I was there. The living room lights were on. Through the wide windows I could see both of them. Garrett, in a robe, holding a whiskey glass. Preston, pacing, phone to his ear. It was strange seeing them like that, so comfortable, so ordinary. Two men who, hours earlier, had nearly killed my sister for sport. Garrett laughed at something on the TV. I clenched my jaw. Every instinct I had screamed to walk up to that door, flash my badge, and end it. But that wasn't how justice works. At least, not yet. Instead, I took photos, house, cars, the pier behind the property. The evidence wouldn't hold up in court, but it would help Isaac's story if things went public. And judging by how fast he worked, that day was coming soon. Back at my apartment, I found 3 missed calls from Isaac. When I called him back, he answered immediately. "I got the footage," he said. "You sure it's clear?" "Clear enough. They're dragging her. The audio picks up laughter, maybe words. I'll clean it up." "You can't just publish it, Isaac. They'll come after you." "They always come after me," he said. "You'd think I'd start charging for the entertainment." I rubbed my forehead. "You're playing with fire." He laughed quietly. "So are they." I hung up, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Elena sinking under the water. I saw Garrett's face, smug and untouched. I saw Preston, the coward hiding behind his father's shadow. And beneath all of it, I felt the same quiet calculation I used to feel on operations when you know someone's going to make a move, and all you have to do is wait for the right angle. The next morning, Mom texted me a photo. A massive arrangement of white lilies sitting on the hospital counter. The card said, "Get well soon, sweetheart. Don't be dramatic." That was it. No name, no apology, no shame, just arrogance. I drove straight to the florist listed on the back of the tag. The clerk remembered the order. Paid in cash, no delivery info, but the man who placed it had a name, Garrett Harrow. I asked to see the order slip and took a photo. Every detail counted. By that afternoon, the footage Isaac mentioned was already spreading through quiet journalist circles. I could tell by the tone of the messages I was getting from old contacts reporters asking, off the record, if I'd heard about a case at Lake Harrow. They didn't know it was personal. Not yet. Isaac called again. "You might want to stay close to Mom," he said. "Garrett's people are asking around. They know someone's digging." "Let them dig," I said. "They'll find me before they find you." "That's what I'm afraid of," he replied. I laughed dryly. "Don't be. They wouldn't last 5 minutes." End quote. I meant it. Garrett's world was built on control and fear, on money buying silence. But none of that works on people like us. You can't threaten someone who's already walked through hell. That evening, Elena woke up for the first time without confusion in her eyes. She looked at me and said, "Did they call?" "No." She nodded slowly. "Then I guess they're waiting to see if I die." I didn't say anything. There was no point. She already understood what kind of family she'd married into. When the nurse came in to check her vitals, I stepped out into the hall. The air smelled like bleach and old air conditioning. I checked my messages again, 3 from Isaac, 1 from an unknown number. It was a text. "Stop digging. This is bigger than you. A friend." I smiled. The Harrows were finally scared enough to play defense. That meant things were moving. I deleted the message, slipped the phone back into my pocket, and started walking toward the exit. The night air outside was sharp, clear, and quiet. The kind of silence that tells you something's about to shift. I didn't know it yet, but the next move wasn't mine. The next morning, I didn't wake to an alarm. The sound that pulled me out of sleep was my phone vibrating nonstop. 3 missed calls from Isaac, 2 from a number labeled private. The last voicemail was short. "Don't call me back. They know." I sat up, my instincts kicking in before my brain caught up. They could only mean the Harrows. And if Isaac said not to call back, he wasn't being dramatic, he'd been found. I threw on jeans and a jacket, checked my holster out of habit, and grabbed my keys. The air outside was sharp, the kind that clears your head whether you want it to or not. I called my contact at the Carson County Sheriff's Department while driving. Hey, this is Special Agent Fiona Darden, CID, I said. I'm following up on a drowning attempt from Saturday at Lake Harrow. Victim's name? Crawford? The deputy interrupted, his tone already defensive. Yeah, we got that one. Look, Agent, we already closed the preliminary file. The Harrow family's been cooperating fully. I gripped the steering wheel. Cooperating? Yeah. Statement says it was a tragic accident, no signs of foul play. They left the scene, I said. They watched her sink. He hesitated. That's not in the report I've got. Then you've got the wrong report. He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat. You know how it is around here. The Harrows own half the businesses. People don't want trouble. I'm not people, I said, and hung up. The Harrows didn't just have money, they had reach. They funded local campaigns, owned a construction company that built half the county, and had a lawyer for every problem. It was the kind of power that turns law into suggestion. When I pulled into the sheriff's parking lot, 2 men in suits were already walking out. One of them, short, tanned, overconfident, held a folder stamped, "Confidential." He looked like the kind of man who'd call himself a crisis manager and mean professional liar. They passed by me without a glance, which was a mistake. I followed them to the sidewalk and caught the last few words of their conversation. If she talks, we'll frame it as hysteria. The old woman's already unstable. End quote. They climbed into a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. On the license plate frame, in silver letters, Harrow Industries. That was enough. I walked straight into the station. The desk officer looked up, already tense. I showed my credentials. Where's Sheriff Dalton? He looked around nervously. He's in a meeting. I'll wait. 2 minutes later, Dalton came out of his office. He was built like a man who used to lift weights but hadn't seen a gym since the last election. His face had that politician's smile, one that never quite reached the eyes. Agent Darden, what can I do for you? You can tell me why you're letting a pair of suspects walk after nearly killing my sister. The smile flickered. Now hold on, we don't have evidence of intent. They pushed her. There's video. That got his attention. He cleared his throat. If you have new evidence, you can submit it through the proper channels. 1. Which channel is that, the one that runs straight through Garrett Harrow's wallet? He glared at me. Watch yourself, Agent. This isn't your jurisdiction. He wasn't wrong, technically, but jurisdiction only matters to people who care about politics. I cared about results. I leaned closer, keeping my voice low. I've worked in countries where corrupt cops get dragged into rivers for less than this. I suggest you stop pretending this is paperwork. This. He didn't move, didn't blink, but his jaw tightened. That was good. Fear means the truth hit home. I left before he could respond. The less time spent in that building, the better. Outside, I called Isaac again, voicemail. Then I called Mom. Have you heard from him? I asked. No. He sent me an email early this morning. It just said, if they show up, don't answer the door. My grip tightened on the phone. They? The Harrows, she said simply. They know what he's doing. That. I drove straight to her house, eyes flicking between mirrors the whole way. It was a small place on the edge of Carson City, cozy and full of old books. When I got there, the curtains were drawn. Mom opened the door with her phone in her hand like a weapon. She wasn't panicking. She never does. She handed me the phone silently. It showed a text from an unknown number. Tell your son to stop digging, or the next lake won't have a rescue. I looked up. When did this come in? 20 minutes ago. That was all I needed. I forwarded it to my CID contact in cybercrimes. Even off-duty, I had access to tools that most civilians don't. Within minutes, he texted back a location ping. The message had been sent from a property registered under Harrow Construction, one of their warehouses. I called Isaac. No answer. Again. Still nothing. The drive there took 8 minutes. The warehouse sat at the edge of an industrial park, surrounded by trucks and silence. A security gate stood half open. I parked just outside and walked in, keeping my hand near my holster. The inside was dark, echoing, full of shadows and dust. My footsteps bounced off concrete walls. Near the back, I found tire tracks, 2 sets, fresh. Then something metallic caught my eye. A phone, lying cracked on the floor. Isaac's model. My stomach dropped. I picked it up, checked the gallery. The last photo was of Garrett Harrow's mansion. I pocketed the phone and moved deeper inside. A faint humming sound came from a corner office. I pushed the door open carefully. Inside, a computer screen glowed, displaying a draft email with attachments. The subject line read, "The truth about the Harrow family." The email was half-written, like Isaac had been interrupted. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I scrolled through the attachments, scanned legal papers, old police reports, financial transfers from 22 years ago. The name Malcolm Pierce showed up over and over again. The door behind me creaked. I turned fast. Nothing there, just the wind through a crack in the paneling. Still, I knew better than to trust an empty sound. I shut off the monitor, pocketed a USB drive sitting on the desk, and left the same way I came. The warehouse felt heavier now, like it was holding its breath. Outside, the sun was already low, the light turning orange over the industrial park. I texted Mom that I was fine and heading back. I didn't tell her what I found, not yet. As I drove away, I passed a black SUV idling at the intersection. The driver's face was hidden behind tinted glass, but I could see the outline of someone watching. I didn't speed up, I didn't slow down, I just kept driving, my hands steady on the wheel, until the SUV turned off in the other direction. For the first time that day, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm, military calm, the kind that comes when every variable clicks into place, and you stop reacting. That's when you know the mission has truly started. The next morning came gray and heavy, the kind of day where light feels like an afterthought. I parked my car near the lake, the same spot where Elena had almost died. The water looked calm now, flat, quiet, indifferent. It was hard to imagine that 3 days ago this place had been chaos. I walked along the pier until my boots stopped at the edge. The boards creaked under my weight. In the distance, a fisherman was prepping his boat. Same kind of man who pulled my sister out of this lake. I wanted to thank him, but I didn't even know his name. Something about being back here felt off. The air smelled of pine and engine oil, but under that was something else, rotting algae, the kind that only surfaces when the lake turns over. I crouched down, staring at the water, and noticed the faint outline of a metal post near the bottom. It looked like part of an old dock, but the location was wrong. I snapped a photo, sent it to Isaac with a message. "Did the Harrows build new decking recently?" He replied almost instantly. "Not them. Their contractor, Pierce Construction. Company went under 20 years ago." Pierce. The same name I'd seen in his unfinished email at the warehouse. I called him immediately. "Isaac, that name's on your files too. Malcolm Pierce. Who was he?" He sighed, the kind of sigh that carries more caffeine than sleep. "Garrett's old business partner. They had a company together in the early 2000s, construction deals around this lake. Then one day, Pierce fell overboard during a fishing trip. Garrett inherited everything." Convenient," I said. "Too convenient," Isaac replied. "The police called it an accident. Case closed in a week. The same sheriff back then? Dalton." The connection hit like a flashbang. Garrett had a history here. One body in the lake wasn't new business for him. "Does anyone still have those files?" I asked. "Detective who handled it retired years ago," Isaac said. "Name's Ron Healy. Lives in Sierra Pines now, keeps bees or something. I've been trying to reach him." "Naughty six. Send me his address," I said. He hesitated. "You're going to spook him." "I'll be polite," I lied. An hour later, I was on the road. The drive to Sierra Pines was 2 hours of winding mountain roads, the kind where cell service disappears and time doesn't matter. Healy's house sat at the end of a dirt lane, surrounded by hives and overgrown grass. The man himself looked like he'd been built out of old habits and regret-tired eyes, gray beard, plaid shirt. He answered the door with suspicion. "Whatever you're selling, I'm not interested." "I'm not selling anything," I said, showing my badge. "Special Agent Fiona Darden, U.S. Army SID. I'm here about the Malcolm Pierce case." The name hit him like a slap. His face drained, and for a second, I thought he might close the door. "That was a long time ago," he muttered. "Not long enough," I said. He didn't invite me in, but he didn't shut me out either. I followed him around to the back porch where he poured black coffee into chipped mugs. The air buzzed with bees, calm and constant. I shouldn't talk about that, he said finally. I signed paperwork, confidentiality agreements. Garrett Harrow paid you off? I asked. He stared at his coffee, not denying it. They gave me an envelope and a photo of my daughter. She was in college then. I was told to sign and forget. And you did? I tried. He looked out toward the trees. But I see that lake every night. You don't forget that kind of thing. What really happened, detective? He rubbed his forehead. Pierce and Harrow fought that morning, loud enough for the marina staff to hear. About money. About a deal gone bad. Then they took the boat out. Only Garrett came back. He said Pierce got drunk, fell, hit the propeller. But the autopsy didn't match. The wound was too clean, blunt trauma before drowning. I wrote it up, sent it to the DA, and the next day it disappeared from evidence. A week later, I got the payoff. I leaned back, watching him. Do you have anything left? Copies, reports, anything? He nodded slowly. I kept a few things. Not for revenge, just insurance. He went inside and returned with an old file folder, edges yellowed with age. Inside were photos, statements, and a faded map of Lake Harrow, with an X marked near the northern cove. That's where they said it happened, he said quietly. But the body was found on the south side. That lake runs deep, but not deep enough for a drift like that. Someone moved him. I took the file, careful not to crease it. I'll make this count, I said. He gave a bitter smile. You can't beat people like Harrow, I've tried. Then you weren't trained like me, I said, and stood. The drive back felt shorter. My mind was already building the timeline. Garrett's first accident 20 years ago, then Elena's. Same lake, same story, same sheriff. Different victim. I called Isaac. We have our pattern, I said. Pierce wasn't an accident, he was practice. Isaac didn't sound surprised. Then this isn't about revenge anymore. It never was, I said. It's about pattern recognition. He laughed once. You sound like you're briefing a mission. I smiled faintly. Maybe I am. And, back in Carson City, I dropped the files at my apartment and went straight to the hospital. Elena was stronger now, still pale, but sitting up, watching TV. She looked at me and gave a small smile. You've got that face, she said. What face? The one you get when someone's about to regret something. Accurate, I said. She reached for her water glass. Don't do anything crazy. Crazy would be letting them walk, I said. I don't do crazy. She nodded slowly. Just don't lose yourself in it. I didn't answer. Because maybe she was right, and maybe she wasn't. That night, I laid the Pierce file across my kitchen table. Names, dates, photos. The pattern was complete. Garrett's empire wasn't built on brilliance. It was built on bodies. Every contract, every deal, someone got buried so he could rise. The system had buried the truth for 20 years. But I wasn't the system. I opened my laptop, typed out a new document, and labeled it Pierce Harrow Connection. The cursor blinked at the end of the title, waiting. Then I added the next line. This story ends where it began at the lake. I didn't need to know what Isaac was doing next. I already knew we were moving in the same direction. By Monday morning, the story was already moving under the surface, quiet, invisible, but alive. Garrett's name had started showing up in small whispers. A contractor who suddenly refused to work with him. A city clerk on vacation after approving one of his zoning deals. A local reporter who had called in a favor from Isaac and was now asking questions no one wanted to answer. That's how rot spreads quietly, until the structure gives out. I sat in my car outside the Carson City courthouse, watching men in suits come and go. The Harrows had lawyers everywhere, men who looked confident, well-fed, and overpaid. But under that, I could see it, small cracks in their rhythm. The family wasn't panicking yet, but they were getting ready to. My phone buzzed. It was Isaac. You'll want to see this, he said. He texted me a link to a private forum, an underground journalist network he still had access to. Someone had anonymously uploaded 2 photos, one of the original Pierce autopsy report, and another of Garrett shaking hands with Sheriff Dalton at a campaign fundraiser 21 years ago. The caption was one word, pattern. Did you post this? I asked. I leaked it, he said. Different thing. Not really, I said. Sure it is. Leaking is polite sabotage. I didn't bother arguing. How long before they trace it back to you? They won't, he said. I'm using a relay chain through 5 countries. It'll take them weeks. Garrett doesn't wait weeks, Isaac chuckled. Neither do I. He hung up, and I sat there for a moment, staring at my reflection in the windshield. I'd dealt with corruption before, officers taking money, reports buried, but this wasn't just a bad apple. It was an entire orchard. The Harrows had turned the justice system into their private defense fund, and everyone had taken a bite. I got out and walked toward the courthouse. Inside, the marble floors were polished to the point of absurdity. The clerk behind the counter didn't look up when I flashed my badge. Records department, I said. She pointed down the hall without a word. I followed the signs until I found the archive room, half the lights out and boxes stacked high. An older man sat behind a computer, half asleep. I'm looking for the original case file on Malcolm Pierce, I said. Year 2003, Carson County. I'll do. He squinted at me. That's sealed. You'll need a court order. I have something better, I said, holding up my CID credentials. He frowned. Military? Federal liaison, I said. It wasn't a lie, just selective truth. He grumbled something about paperwork but typed anyway. After a moment, he said, You didn't hear this from me, but that file was requested last week. By who? He hesitated, then turned the monitor toward me. The request form listed one name. Garrett Harrow. He'd pulled his own crime out of the archives. I left before the clerk could ask questions. Outside, I called Isaac. He's cleaning up, I said. Pulled the Pierce file. Then he knows someone's close. Yeah. Us. As I was talking, a black SUV pulled up across the street. Same model I'd seen near the warehouse. A man stepped out tall, built, wearing sunglasses despite the clouds. He leaned on the car and lit a cigarette, pretending to check his phone. Isaac must have heard my silence. You see something? Not yet, I said. The man finished his cigarette, dropped it, and crushed it with his boot. Then he got back in the SUV and drove off slowly, not away from me but around the block. Yeah? I said into the phone. They're watching. Isaac's tone hardened. Then you stay smart, Fiona. He'll send muscle before lawyers. I smiled faintly. He should have checked my file before trying that. That afternoon, I stopped by the hospital again. Elena looked stronger. Her color had returned, and she could sit up on her own now. Mom was reading next to her, glasses halfway down her nose. Elena looked up when I entered. You look tired. I'm fine, I said. Liar, Mom said without looking up from her book. I ignored her. Elena, the police might ask you some questions soon. Be ready. She frowned. What kind of questions? The kind they ask when they want to make something disappear. She set her jaw. Then I'll make sure it doesn't. End quote. There it was, that Steele I'd been waiting to see. For so long she'd been trying to please everyone, especially Preston. Now, that instinct was gone. Good, I said, because once this hits they'll try to make you look unstable. Mom closed her book. Let them try. I've got everything documented. She wasn't bluffing. The woman had timestamps, photos, copies of text messages, even the florist's receipt. Years of being ignored had made her meticulous. By the time I left, the evening sky was turning dark. I drove home, half expecting the SUV again. It didn't show. Either they were done watching for the day or confident I wouldn't make a move. They were wrong on both counts. At home, I poured myself a cup of cheap coffee and spread everything across my dining table. Healy's files, Isaac's notes, the map of the lake, the hospital reports. Every thread led back to the same pattern. Garrett caused chaos, Dalton cleaned it up, and money kept everyone quiet. It wasn't rage that hit me then. It was focused, the same cold, narrow calm that came before an operation. The kind where you see everything 3 steps ahead. I opened my laptop and started typing a report, not for my superiors, not for the system, but for myself. I detailed every name, every date, every inconsistency. I attached the photos, the messages, the proof of manipulation. It wasn't a police report. It was a contingency plan. If something happened to me, Isaac would have it. And Isaac knew what to do with evidence. My phone buzzed again. A new text. No number, just coordinates and a message. You want answers? Come alone. I recognized the coordinates immediately. North side of the lake. The same area marked with an X on Healy's old map. I didn't bother telling Isaac. he'd try to stop me. And that wasn't an option. I checked my sidearm, grabbed a flashlight, and drove. The road wound through dense trees, no streetlights, no traffic. When I reached the clearing, I parked the car and stepped out. The wind coming off the water was cold enough to sting. A single lantern glowed near the edge of the pier. Someone was waiting. It wasn't Garrett. It was Preston. He looked different, shaken, tired, like he hadn't slept in days. His voice cracked when he spoke. "You shouldn't be here." "Then why invite me?" I asked. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Because I didn't know who else to talk to." I stayed silent. "My dad's losing it," he said finally. "He's paranoid, tearing up files, yelling at everyone. He said you were working with Isaac, and that Isaac's about to ruin us." "Sounds accurate," I said. He looked down. "I didn't mean for her to get hurt, I swear." "Then why didn't you stop him?" He didn't answer, just stared at the lake. The silence stretched. Finally, he said, "You don't understand what he's capable of." "Actually," I said quietly, "I understand perfectly." The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the pier. Preston took a step closer, lowering his voice. "If you go after him, you'll regret it. He has people. The sheriff, the judge, half the city. They'll bury you." I smiled, just enough for him to see it. "They've tried burying me before." He swallowed hard. "Then you're either very brave or very stupid." "Maybe both." He turned to leave, but before he did, he muttered something that stopped me cold. "There's more under that lake than you think." Then he was gone, walking fast toward the dark line of trees. I stood there, staring at the black water rippling against the pier. Somewhere beneath that calm surface, the truth was waiting. And I was done waiting for it to come up on its own. The lake looked the same as it always did still. Dark, pretending to be innocent. I stood there for a while, listening to the soft slap of water against the pier, thinking about what Preston had said. "There's more under that lake than you think." It sounded like a confession wrapped in cowardice. He hadn't come there to warn me. He'd come to save himself. And if there was something else buried in that lake, I intended to find it. The next morning, I drove back to the CID field office I hadn't set foot in for weeks. The front desk sergeant raised an eyebrow. "Didn't think we'd see you this week, Darden." "Just need a few things," I said. I went straight to the evidence storage room. A few quiet favors, and one old badge number later, I walked out with a waterproof flashlight, a portable sonar unit, and a compact dive mask. I wasn't planning on getting wet, but if Preston was telling the truth, I needed more than a flashlight and intuition. Back at Lake Harrow, the afternoon sun hit the water like a mirror. The air smelled metallic like storm weather. I powered on the sonar and watched the small screen flicker. At first, it was just static and fish. Then a shape appeared, faint and angular, sitting near the lake bed, about 20 feet down. It wasn't natural. Too straight, too precise. I marked the coordinates and sent them to Isaac. "Tell me this doesn't look like a container," he called instantly. "What kind of container?" "Metal. About 6 by 4 feet. He paused. "You think it's what I think it is?" "I think Garrett's been dumping more than trash in this lake." "Don't touch it," he said. "If it's evidence, we need to get it photographed properly." "Then bring a camera," I said, and hung up. I waited near the shore, the sonar still pulsing, counting the seconds. Isaac showed up 40 minutes later in a rental car that looked like it belonged in a crime documentary. He got out, wearing his usual uniform, dark jacket, faded jeans, expression halfway between curious and dangerous. "Show me," he said. We walked out onto the pier. I handed him the sonar. He stared at the screen, then at the lake. "You weren't exaggerating." "I never do." He knelt, scanning through the readings. "This shape, it's sealed. Too big for a box, too small for a boat. It's got symmetry. Burial symmetry," I said. He glanced at me. "You've been doing this too long. Long enough to know that bodies don't stay buried forever." Isaac straightened, exhaling through his teeth. "All right, we'll get a dive crew." "I already called one," I said. "Off-duty team from the base. They owe me a favor." He blinked. "You called them before you called me?" "They're faster." He gave a dry laugh. "Remind me never to play chess with you. M." An hour later, the divers arrived in a pickup. 3 of them former Navy guys now working private salvage. No paperwork, no questions. I briefed them, short, and clean. There's an object at the bottom. We need photos, measurements, nothing else. They nodded, slid into wetsuits, and disappeared under the surface one by one. The lake rippled, then went still again. 10 minutes later, the first diver came up, pulled off his mask, and said, "You're not gonna like this." "What is it?" I asked. He climbed onto the dock and pointed at the screen on his underwater camera. The image showed a rusted container half buried in silt, the lid partially broken. Inside, a flash of something pale human bone. Isaac leaned in. "Jesus Christ." The diver wiped water from his face. "That thing's been down there a long time. There's rope, too. Heavy-duty industrial stuff. Someone wanted it to stay put." My chest tightened not from shock but recognition. It all fit. Pierce's body was supposed to have been found near the south end, but the autopsy photos in Healy's folder showed a bruise on the right temple, not consistent with a fall from a boat. Garrett hadn't dumped him where he died. He'd moved him. He'd hidden the real grave under the pretense of an accident. "Get it documented," I said. Isaac took photos from every angle. "This will end him." "Maybe," I said, "but ending him isn't enough. I want him exposed." He lowered the camera. "You're starting to sound like me." "I'm starting to understand you," I said. We packed up before dark. The divers left quietly, understanding that this wasn't something they wanted to be associated with. I told Isaac to go home, lock his doors, and send copies of everything to 2 separate hard drives. He didn't argue. "What about you?" "I've got someone to visit." "Oh." Garrett Harrow's office sat on the top floor of a downtown glass fortress, a company tower built from arrogance and unpaid favors. I walked in wearing civilian clothes, holding a plain envelope. The receptionist gave me the same fake smile people use when they think they're safe. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. "Not really." I slid the envelope across the counter. "But you'll want to make sure he sees this immediately." She frowned. "May I ask who it's from?" "You can," I said, "but he'll figure it out faster than you will." She hesitated, then buzzed me through. "Money makes people obedient. Confidence makes them nervous." Garrett's office looked like the inside of a luxury watch, cold, expensive, and ticking with quiet menace. He stood behind his desk when I entered, silver hair perfect, tie knotted so tight it looked like it was choking him. "Agent Darden," he said smoothly. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "You already know." I placed the envelope on his desk. "That's a photo from the lake. You might recognize what's in it." He didn't open it right away. He just stared at me. "You think this is smart?" "I think it's overdue." He finally slid the photo out. His jaw tightened, but his expression didn't change. Years of manipulation had given him an iron face. "Malcolm Pierce," I said quietly. 20 years at the bottom of your lake, and now he's got company." My sister almost joined him. Garrett leaned back, voice calm. "You should be careful, Agent. You're trespassing in waters you don't understand." "I understand them perfectly. You kill what gets in your way, then buy the people who clean it up." He smiled faintly. "And you think a few pictures change that?" "I think they're enough to make people start asking questions. Journalists, prosecutors, voters." He tossed the photo back on the desk. "You're not going to get justice, Miss Darden. You're going to get noise. Scandal fades. Power doesn't." I stepped closer. "You're mistaking power for control, and you just lost control." For the first time, I saw the flicker of something real behind his eyes. Not fear exactly, but the moment before it. "I suggest you go home," he said, "before your family suffers more. Accidents." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what Malcolm Pierce heard before he drowned." I turned and left without another word. Outside, the air felt cleaner, sharper. I didn't believe in coincidences, and I didn't believe in threats that go unanswered. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed again. Isaac's voice was tight. "The leak's live. Every major outlet has it now. Pierce, Dalton, the lake, all of it. We just detonated the Harrow legacy." I didn't respond right away. I looked back at the tower, its windows glowing gold in the sunset like nothing could touch it. Everything looks untouchable right before it cracks. Garrett's tower still stood shining the next morning, but the air around it had changed. There was movement, news vans outside, reporters on the sidewalk, a few of his employees pretending not to exist. The leak had detonated like a precision strike, and I hadn't even pulled the trigger myself. I sat in my car across the street, sipping coffee that had gone cold hours ago. On the radio, a local talk show was already chewing on the story. Lake Harrow businessman implicated in 20-year-old drowning case. Possible corruption in Carson County Sheriff's Office. They didn't know half of it yet, but Garrett did. He walked out of his building through a side entrance, 2 bodyguards flanking him. He wasn't running, he was adapting. That's what predators do. When the light hits them, they move deeper into the shadows. I texted Isaac. He's on the move. He replied, I'm 2 blocks away. Stay out of sight. Oh, Will. That was the kind of advice I never followed. I watched Garrett's SUV pull away and fall into traffic. Instead of tailing him directly, I took the next street and looped around, staying 2 cars behind. The city's midday chaos made it easy to blend in. The SUV drove north out of downtown, past the hospital, toward the highway. Then my phone buzzed again. Isaac's voice came through, low and quick. He's heading toward the lake. We need to talk before you do anything stupid. Define stupid. Den. Anything you'd do before lunch? I ignored him. Garrett's vehicle turned off near the Marina Road, the same area where Elena had almost drowned. My gut tightened. He wasn't coming here to hide. He was coming to destroy something. When the SUV stopped near a maintenance shed, I parked half a mile back and approached on foot through the trees. The wind was sharp, carrying that same cold scent of pine and gasoline. Through the scope of my binoculars, I saw Garrett speaking with Sheriff Dalton. 2 men who should have been enemies but clearly weren't. Dalton handed him a small metal case, the kind evidence techs use. Garrett opened it, looked inside, and nodded. Whatever was in that case, it was something they didn't want the world to see. I snapped a photo just as a noise behind me broke the silence. A twig. A soft crunch. I turned fast, but not fast enough. Someone hit me from the side, a body slamming into my ribs, knocking the air out of me. I went down hard, rolled, and caught a glimpse of a man in tactical black, face covered. He swung again. This time, I caught his wrist and twisted, sending the weapon a short baton into the dirt. He wasn't random. His movements were trained, clean, quiet, hired muscle, with military background, maybe private security. I could almost respect it. Almost. He lunged again, knife drawn. I sidestepped, let his weight carry him forward, and drove my knee into his chest. He fell, coughing, and I caught the handle of the knife before he could grab it. You really picked the wrong vet to jump, I said, pressing the blade against his neck. He didn't talk, but I didn't need him to. His sleeve shifted enough for me to see the insignia stitched near his wrist, Harrow Industries Security Division. They weren't even trying to hide it. I pulled a zip tie from my pocket and secured his wrists. Tell your boss I said hi. Leaving him there, I moved closer to the shed. Garrett and Dalton were already walking toward the lake now, carrying the case. They stopped near the pier, the same pier from the footage, the same spot where Elena's blood had hit the water. Garrett kneeled, opened the case, and pulled out a stack of papers sealed in plastic. Evidence. He tossed them into the water. Dalton lit a match and dropped it. The plastic caught fire before sinking, flames skimming across the surface like a trail of guilt. I took photos of everything, zoomed tight on their faces. That was my insurance policy. A sharp whistle behind me made me turn again. Isaac crouched near the tree line. He motioned for me to back away. I slipped back into the woods, keeping low until we reached his car. You've got to stop doing that, he muttered. I was watching him destroy evidence. He glanced over. So was I, from a safer distance. I showed him the photos. His eyes narrowed. This is enough to get Dalton disbarred, maybe indicted. Not enough for Garrett. He looked at me. You're not going to let it end with an arrest, are you? Arrests are temporary. I want something permanent. He didn't argue, just started the car. The tires crunched over gravel as we pulled away. By nightfall, the whole county was buzzing. The local DA had issued a statement of concern. The sheriff's department was reviewing its records. Garrett's PR team called it a smear campaign. And beneath all that noise, the old network of favors and handshakes was collapsing. At home, I opened my laptop and uploaded the new photos to a secure drive. My desk was covered in notes, sketches, and timelines. It looked less like an apartment and more like a war room. Mom called around midnight. She didn't waste time with small talk. He's fighting back, she said. I know. Endus. He called here earlier. Pretended it was about Elena's medical bills. I hung up. You did the right thing. I didn't do it for the right reason, she said. I did it because his voice made me sick. There was silence after that, the kind that says everything words can't. After we hung up, I poured another coffee and stared at the wall of evidence in front of me. Every photo, every file, every face. Each one connected by a single thread. Garrett Harrow. He was at the center of every lie, every manipulation, every accident. Then my phone buzzed again. A new number. One message. You can't save her twice. I stared at the words. No name, no punctuation. But I knew exactly who sent it. I grabbed my jacket and keys, heart hammering but mind cold. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Elena was still a loose end in Garrett's world, and loose ends got cut. The hospital was 20 minutes away, but I made it in 12. When I burst into her room, she was awake, reading under the dim glow of the bedside lamp. She looked up, startled. What's wrong? I scanned the hallway, the room, everything. Did anyone come by? Visitors? Calls? No, she said slowly. Why? I didn't answer. I just checked the window locks, the door hinge, even the vent. Finally, she said softly, You think he'll come for me? I know he will, I said. She exhaled, long and calm. Then let him. I'm tired of being scared. And for Juan. That's the moment I realized something had shifted in her. The victim was gone. What sat in front of me now was resolve. Then we end this, I said. She nodded. Together. I looked out the window at the city lights reflecting off the glass, each one flickering like the calm before a detonation. Justice wasn't coming from a courtroom anymore. It was already in motion, quiet, precise, and personal. The morning started with silence, then chaos. My phone lit up before sunrise. Texts, missed calls, emails, reporters, investigators, people I hadn't heard from in years. The story was everywhere now. Military investigator tied to Harrow corruption scandal. Pierce murder case reopened. Family powerhouse faces federal scrutiny. I turned off the TV after the third segment. The coverage wasn't what bothered me. It was how fast it spread. Garrett's people weren't scrambling, they were striking back. They'd twisted the story to make me look like the aggressor, the vengeful sister, the unstable veteran, the same playbook they'd used for decades. Isaac called before I could process it all. His tone was sharp, wired with caffeine and adrenaline. You've seen it? Yeah, I said. They flipped the narrative overnight. They're claiming you falsified the CID evidence. They can claim whatever they want. The evidence speaks louder. Palson. Not when the audience has already been bought, he said. Their lawyers are framing you as a rogue agent acting on personal vendetta. They even mentioned Mom. That last part made me pause. They brought her into it? They're calling her an emotionally unstable witness influenced by grief. It's disgusting. My jaw tightened. Then we make it worse for them. You're already their main story, he said dryly. I'm fine with that. He sighed. I figured you'd say that. I've got something, Fiona. An internal memo. Harrow Industries sent it to their PR and legal teams last night. A contact of mine forwarded it. What's in it? He hesitated. A hit order. Not literal, but they're planning to destroy you publicly. They've hired private investigators to dig up anything: training records, service reports, disciplinary history. They'll twist it however they can. I stared at the wall, the morning light slicing through the blinds. Let them dig. They'll find medals and citations. That'll scare them more. Maybe. But it'll also make them desperate. Desperation was good. Desperation made men like Garrett sloppy. By noon, the courthouse was surrounded. Reporters shouting, cameras flashing, everyone trying to get a statement. I parked 3 blocks away and walked in through the side entrance. I wasn't there to perform, I was there to watch it burn. Inside, Sheriff Dalton stood at a podium, doing his best impression of a man under control. We take these allegations seriously, he said into the microphones. The Carson County Sheriff's Department will cooperate fully with federal investigators. That last line made me laugh under my breath. Dalton cooperating with anyone was like a fox volunteering for henhouse duty. Reporters kept shouting his name, throwing questions, and one of them finally broke through. Sheriff, Is it true that new evidence links your department to cover-ups dating back 20 years? Dalton's smile twitched. I can't comment on ongoing investigations. That was the tell. A man who can't comment is a man who's been caught. From across the room, I caught sight of Garrett. He stood in the corner, calm, almost amused, a statue in a designer suit. His lawyer leaned in occasionally, whispering. Garrett didn't respond. He didn't need to. He believed money would always outlast scandal. Isaac appeared beside me, his expression grim but alive. You're enjoying this, he muttered. I'm appreciating it, I corrected. He handed me a folded piece of paper. This came from a friend in D.C. The Justice Department just opened a federal probe. Fraud, obstruction, conspiracy. It's officially beyond county hands now. Good. Isaac glanced at Garrett. He doesn't look scared. He's not. Not yet. I do. The press conference broke up shortly after. Garrett exited through a side door, his bodyguards forming a human wall. But I didn't follow him. I went the other way straight to the DA's office upstairs. The DA, Caroline Vega, was younger than I expected. Sharp eyes, steady posture. She looked like someone who'd already fought a few battles she wasn't supposed to win. I've read your reports, she said, motioning for me to sit. Impressive work, but we're going to need more than that to take him down. Circumstantial evidence won't hold up. You have a body? I said. You have records, financial links, and 2 witnesses willing to testify. She gave a small, humorless smile. And I have a courthouse full of people who owe Garrett Harrow favors. You don't break that kind of influence with a press leak. Then we break it another way. She raised an eyebrow. You sound like you're not talking about the legal system. End of 40. I'm talking about truth, I said. Real truth. Not the kind that fits into a courtroom. She leaned back, assessing me. You're dangerous. Efficient. I corrected. After I left, the afternoon sky had turned a dull gray. Storm rolling in fitting. I drove back toward the lake again, because no matter how far the story spread, everything always circled back to that water. The scene of every lie, every secret. At the marina, a county cleanup crew was already out there, dredging debris, maybe pretending to reinvestigate. Their boats cut small wakes through the still surface. I parked and walked along the pier, stopping where the wood darkened from years of water damage. The same spot Elena had fallen. The memory wasn't cinematic. It was clinical. The sound, the impact, the laughter, it all played back in sharp, cold fragments. That was how trauma really worked. You don't relive it. You reanalyze it. A voice behind me broke the silence. You shouldn't be here. It was Dalton. Alone, no uniform this time, just a jacket and a look that didn't match his usual arrogance. Funny, I said. That's exactly what your job description says. He sighed. This has gone too far. It's gone exactly far enough. You don't understand. If Harrow goes down, a lot of people go with him. Judges, mayors, bankers. It'll ruin this county. Then maybe it deserves to be ruined. Half. He shook his head. You think you're the hero in this? You're not. You're just another weapon someone else will use. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You ever think maybe some weapons choose their own targets? For a second, he didn't have an answer. That silence was its own confession. When I walked back to my car, rain started falling slow, heavy drops that soaked through the asphalt. I didn't rush. I didn't hide. Let the world see me walking through it. By the time I got home, the headlines had changed again. Corruption probe expands. Sheriff under scrutiny. Anonymous sources confirm evidence found in Lake Harrow. And then, at the very bottom of the page, one new line. Elena Crawford, released from hospital, speaks to federal agents. I closed the laptop. She hadn't told me, which meant she didn't need to. That was how I knew the balance had shifted. The Harrows were still standing, but for the first time, they were standing on sinking ground. By the time the federal agents rolled into Carson City, the town looked like a wasp nest someone had kicked open. News trucks parked outside the courthouse, protesters gathered with signs that didn't make sense, and half the local officials were on leave without explanation. The Harrows had spent years buying silence, and now every voice they'd buried was screaming at once. I drove past the courthouse, watching it all unfold. None of it surprised me. Revolutions never look organized up close. They look chaotic, scared, and loud. That's how you know they're real, Isaac called while I was at a red light. His voice carried that edge between satisfaction and caution. Fiona, the FBI just raided Harrow Industries. They froze the accounts, seized the servers, and hauled Dalton in for questioning. You did it. Hat. I stared out the window at the flashing lights in the distance. No, I said quietly. It's not done yet. He paused. You're thinking about Preston. I'm thinking about what Preston said. There's more under that lake than we've seen. He sighed. Can't you ever let anything be over? Not when it starts with a lie. He didn't argue. He knew me too well for that. That night, I went back to Lake Harrow. No backup, no plan. Just a flashlight, a crowbar, and a mind that didn't want to rest. The rain from the day before had turned the ground into soft mud. My boots sank with every step. The air smelled like copper and pine, and the lake reflected the faint orange glow from the town across the water. The old maintenance shed was still there. The lock was new, probably replaced after the feds swept through, but locks are only as strong as the hands that install them. One good twist of the crowbar, and it gave way with a crack. Inside, the place was a time capsule. Tools scattered, dusty blueprints on the table, the faint smell of gasoline soaked into the floorboards. A single filing cabinet sat in the corner, its drawers warped from humidity. I pried the top one open. Inside were folders labeled with contract codes and company initials, most of them meaningless. But then I saw it. Pierce Expansion Project, 2003. I opened it carefully. Inside were photos of the original dock construction, invoices, and one handwritten note that stopped me cold. Use South Cove for disposal. Sheriff cleared path. No paperwork. There it was. Proof that Dalton had helped cover up the first death. And maybe more. Footsteps behind me broke the silence. Slow, deliberate, heavy. I didn't turn right away. I knew the cadence of those steps. The sound of a man who'd never had to rush in his life. Couldn't stay away, could you? Garrett's voice was low even. He stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat. I told you to go home. I faced him. You should have listened to your own advice. He smiled faintly. You think this ends with me in handcuffs? The world doesn't work that way, Agent Darden. You might have shaken the tree, but I planted the roots. You mean the bodies? He stepped closer. You're a soldier. You of all people should understand. Some things require casualties. You drowned a man for money and nearly killed my sister for pride. Don't call that necessity. Garrett's eyes flickered, the mask cracking for a split second. Your sister was weak. She didn't belong in my family. She embarrassed us. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. Say that again. He didn't. He just stared at me, calm and deliberate, the kind of control that only comes from a man who's never faced consequence. Then he took another step forward. You think you've exposed me, but all you've done is make me dangerous. I took a slow breath. You were dangerous the moment you thought you could bury people and call it business. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of rain on the roof filled the air, heavy and rhythmic. Then he lunged. He wasn't fast, but he was determined. I sidestepped, his shoulder clipping my arm. We hit the table hard, papers scattering. He grabbed for my wrist, trying to twist the flashlight out of my hand. Years of combat training kicked in before thought could catch up. I drove my elbow into his ribs, hard enough to make him grunt, then shoved him back. He stumbled, hit the shelf, and sent a cascade of metal tools clattering to the floor. He reached for one, a hammer, but I kicked it away. Stop, I said sharply. He laughed, breath ragged. You won't shoot me. I don't need to. He straightened, chest heaving. You think the law will do it? You've seen how this town works. They'll make a deal, I'll walk, and you'll spend the rest of your life wondering why you didn't finish it yourself. He wasn't wrong. I'd seen worse men walk free. But this time, something felt different. Garrett didn't look untouchable anymore. He looked old, smaller, like the world had finally caught up. Outside, headlights flickered across the water. A car pulled up near the shore. Doors slammed. Voices shouted. Garrett turned toward the noise, realization dawning too late. You didn't call them? I said. But Isaac probably did. The agents came in fast, 2 through the front, 1 through the side. Federal, not local. They had the warrant, the timing, and the satisfaction of knowing exactly who they were arresting. Garrett didn't resist. He just looked at me one last time, expression unreadable. "You think you've won?" he said quietly. "No," I said. "I think you finally lost." On. They cuffed him, read the charges, and led him out into the rain. His shoes left dark, heavy prints on the floorboards, marks that would fade by morning. But not for me. As the agents cleared the room, Isaac stepped inside holding his phone. "I got the footage," he said. "They've got everything on record. Confession, assault, obstruction, the works." I nodded. "Good." He looked around. "You okay?" "I'm fine." He didn't believe me, but he didn't push. "Elena's at Mom's," he said. "She saw the news. She's safe." I picked up the folder from the floor, the one labeled Pierce Expansion Project. The ink had bled from the rain, but the words were still there. I folded it and handed it to him. "This started with one dead man and one buried truth," I said. "Now it ends with both above water." Isaac slipped the folder into his jacket. "You know, you could have been a journalist." "I prefer results," I said. We stepped outside together. The rain had eased to a fine mist, the kind that softens everything except memory. The flashing lights from the patrol cars turned the lake silver. For the first time, it looked clean. Garrett was already in the back seat of one of the cars, head bowed, hands cuffed. For a man who'd controlled everything for decades, he looked like someone finally forced to see himself without the mirror of power. I didn't say a word as they drove him away. I just watched the car's taillights disappear into the fog. Isaac looked at me. "So, now what?" I exhaled, long and steady. "Now the noise begins." He smiled slightly. "And when it ends?" "It won't," I said. "It just gets quieter." The wind off the lake carried the faint smell of rain and gasoline. Somewhere under that calm surface, Pierce was still there, silent, patient, finally vindicated. And for the first time since this all began, the water didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like proof. The morning after Garrett's arrest, the city was quiet in that strange way that only comes after chaos. News anchors had already started the postmortems, politicians were scrambling to distance themselves, and everyone suddenly remembered how much they had always suspected something. The same people who toasted him at charity galas now said his name like it left a bad taste. I sat in Mom's kitchen, the same one where Elena and I used to fight over who got the bigger slice of pie. Now it smelled like coffee and disinfectant. The radio hummed with updates about arraignments, federal indictments, and asset freezes. Garrett's lawyer had filed motions, but none of them mattered. The system he'd built to protect himself was turning inward, eating him alive. Mom placed a mug in front of me. "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't," I said. She sat down opposite me. "You should feel something. Relief, at least." "I do," I said after a moment. "Just not the kind people expect." She studied me, her hands cupping the mug for warmth. "You didn't just take them down for Elena, did you?" "No," I said. "I did it because they thought they could make someone disappear and still have breakfast the next morning." She gave a small, tired smile. "That sounds like something your father would have said." I didn't answer. The coffee was bitter, grounding. Outside, the sky was gray again. That soft Pacific fog that never fully lifts. Elena was upstairs, resting. She'd been quiet since Garrett's arrest. Not sad, not shaken, just quiet in a way that suggested she was relearning what peace sounded like. The doorbell rang around noon. Isaac let himself in, waving a newspaper like it was a trophy. Front page, top fold. Harrow indicted on 21 counts. He tossed it on the table, grinning. "You got your justice, sis." I looked at the headline. Harrow dynasty collapses as federal probe deepens. Beneath it, a smaller subheading. Sources credit anonymous whistleblower tied to Military Intelligence Division. I raised an eyebrow. "Anonymous?" He shrugged. "You didn't think I'd let them put your name on it, did you? You'd never get clearance again." I leaned back, exhaling. "You always were better at disappearing." "Occupational habit," he said, pouring himself coffee. "So what now? You planning on going back to base? Or is this your retirement party?" "I haven't decided," I said. "But I'm not finished." "Finished?" he asked. "The guy's in custody. The feds are crawling all over his empire. Even Dalton's turning on him to save his own skin. What's left?" "The system," I said. "It doesn't fix itself. Someone has to clean the mess, he snorted. And you're volunteering for janitorial duty? I smiled faintly. You always told me I like order. I nod. He lifted his cup in mock salute. To the most dangerous librarian the army ever produced. Mom shook her head but smiled too. The kind of smile that says she's proud and terrified at the same time. Upstairs, the floor creaked. Elena appeared at the top of the stairs, leaning against the railing. She looked fragile but steadier than she had in weeks. I heard laughing, she said softly. Isaac waved. Morning, miracle girl. She came down slowly, her eyes on the newspaper. Is it true? Every word, I said. They can't bury it this time. She sat beside me, tracing the print with her finger. I used to think justice looked like handcuffs and trials, she said. Now I think it just looks like the truth staying in daylight. Truth doesn't always look clean, I said. Sometimes it crawls out of the mud. She nodded. Still better than drowning. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that wasn't awkward or heavy, just full of everything that didn't need to be said anymore. By afternoon, agents came by to take final statements. They were polite but clinical, the way people are when they've already read your story in a file. I gave them the same answers I'd given a dozen times before. When they left, one of them turned at the door. Ma'am, I hope you know you did the right thing. I didn't answer. Right and wrong had stopped being clear somewhere around the point where the law failed the first time. That evening, I drove to the edge of town, where the view of Lake Harrow stretched wide and still. The water had gone silver under the fading light. No sirens, no cameras, no noise, just reflection. I parked and walked down to the pier, the boards creaking under my boots. The same spot, the same cold air, but this time, there was no anger left in it. I stood there for a long while. Then I spoke, not to anyone in particular, but to the air itself. You were right, Dad. Evil doesn't vanish, it just gets quieter until someone calls its name again. The wind rippled across the water like it heard me. Footsteps approached behind me. Elena's. She didn't say anything, just stood beside me, watching the horizon. After a while, she said, You ever think about what happens next? I smiled slightly. Every day. But the future's just another mission. She nodded. Maybe this time it's one we get to pick. The reflection of the sky shimmered in her eyes, and for a brief second, I saw the little sister who used to chase fireflies in our backyard. Not broken, not afraid, just alive. We turned back toward the car, our steps slow but sure. The road home stretched long and quiet ahead, the kind of quiet that didn't scare us anymore. When we reached the top of the hill, the sun broke through the clouds, just a thin sliver of gold cutting across the gray. Elena looked at it and smiled. Looks like it's clearing, she said. Yeah, I replied. Finally. And for once, I didn't feel like correcting her. The lake was calm again. Almost too calm. As if the world had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. Weeks had passed since Garrett's arrest, and the news cycle had already found fresher scandals to feed on. The Harrow name, once printed on billboards and charity galas, now sat in bold type on court documents and auction listings. His empire was dismantled piece by piece, every shell company and offshore account dragged into the light. The man who once owned half the county was now reduced to a number in an orange jumpsuit. I didn't go to the sentencing hearing. I didn't need to. I already knew the outcome. 25 years without parole, pending appeal. The papers called it historic justice. I called it math. One life stolen, one returned to balance. That morning, I sat in the small 2-bedroom apartment above the old public library, the one Mom had bought back after everything ended. The floors creaked, the paint peeled, and the heater rattled, but it was home in a way no mansion could ever be. Elena was in the kitchen making pancakes, humming to herself, off-key but steady. The sound made me smile. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed the noise of ordinary life. She walked out carrying 2 plates, still limping slightly from her recovery. You didn't tell me you fixed the heater, she said. I didn't, I said, taking a plate. It just started working again. Miracle, she said. Or neglect, I replied. Hard to tell with old buildings. We ate quietly for a while, sunlight spilling across the table. The city outside was already moving, kids running to school, a garbage truck growling down the street, someone playing country music from an open window. After everything, The normalcy almost felt suspicious. Elena finally spoke. Do you ever think about what he said? Garrett, I mean? About how people like him always survive? I looked up at her. They do survive, just not the way they think. She tilted her head. Meaning? Men like him spend their whole lives pretending they're untouchable. When that illusion breaks, it doesn't kill them, it eats them. Slowly. She nodded, eyes thoughtful. So that's justice? It's one version of it. I poured more coffee and leaned back in the chair. Justice isn't loud, Lena. It doesn't always look like a courtroom or a headline. Sometimes it's just a man in a cell, realizing no one's taking his calls anymore. She smiled faintly. And what about us? We get to live, I said simply. After breakfast, I headed to the old library downstairs. The city had closed it years ago, but Mom had been slowly restoring it one shelf, one bulb at a time. I'd started helping her after the case ended, sorting old books and repairing broken catalog drawers. It wasn't glamorous, but there was something grounding about it: order, sequence, purpose. The kind of work that doesn't ask questions. As I walked through the aisles, the smell of paper and dust filled the air. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Isaac. Don't tell me you're working, he said when I picked up. Sorting books isn't work, I said. Everything you do turns into an operation. He wasn't wrong. How's life on the outside? I asked. Busy, my story's blowing up. They want me to write a follow-up, something about corruption in small-town law enforcement. You'll make enemies. He laughed. I already have a favorite sister in the army. Enemies are the family tradition. There was a pause, the kind that feels like static. Then his voice softened. You did good, Fi. You know that, right? I didn't answer right away. We all did. He exhaled. Yeah. Still feels weird not having another fight lined up. Enjoy it while it lasts, I said. The world doesn't stay quiet long. He chuckled. You always know how to ruin a peaceful moment. That's why you love me, I said, and hung up. I spent the rest of the afternoon shelving books. Each one had its place, its number, its own quiet reason to exist. Maybe that was why I liked it. After months of lies and manipulation, it was nice dealing with something that made sense. By sunset, the last of the light streamed through the high windows, painting the shelves gold. I sat on the floor between two rows, letting the silence stretch out. Mom found me there later, carrying a box of new donations. You're hiding, she said. Organizing. I corrected. She smiled. Same thing in your case. She set the box down beside me and lowered herself to the floor with a soft sigh. You know, I used to think the hardest part was losing control. Turns out it's getting it back. I looked at her. You don't regret any of it? Her eyes met mine, calm and unwavering. Regret implies I'd do it differently. I wouldn't. What? The simplicity of her answer left no space for argument. We sat there for a while. Two women who had spent their lives cleaning up after the chaos of men, surrounded by books no one had touched in years. The hum of the city drifted through the cracked windows, steady and familiar. Later that night, I walked out to the balcony. The air was cold, the kind that bites but clears your head. Down below, the streetlights reflected off wet pavement. Somewhere far off, a siren wailed, then faded into nothing. I thought about everything that had happened. The lake, the lies, the calls that changed everything, and realized how quiet the world had become. Not empty quiet, peaceful quiet. The kind that doesn't demand explanation. Elena joined me, a blanket draped over her shoulders. She looked better now, stronger. The fear that once lived behind her eyes was gone. Can you believe this used to be home? She said softly. It still is, I replied. She leaned on the railing beside me. You ever think we'll stop looking over our shoulders? One day, I said, but not yet. Then what do we do until then? I looked out over the city, lights stretching to the horizon. We keep moving. We build something better. She nodded slowly. You sound like Dad again. Guess some things stick. The wind picked up, carrying the faint smell of rain. The night didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt open, like something had finally shifted. Behind us, the light from the library windows spilled onto the street. It was warm and soft, flickering with the rhythm of an old bulb but still holding steady. Elena wrapped the blanket tighter and smiled faintly. You know, for a story that started with drowning, this one didn't end underwater. I looked at her. No, I said. It ended exactly where it should on solid ground. May. And we stood there, two survivors of the same storm, watching the city breathe, letting the quiet carry the weight that words never could.